And we only see this in science. There's no examples of this in nature. Is that correct?
There is in my Josh asked about my speculation, and in my speculation, these premonitions, telepathic friendships, meaningful coincidences, these all fall into this category, I think.
But there's no didactic or like very, you know, easily recognizable metaphor of this happening in nature, right? This is something, not to say that what you're saying, I don't think I mean, at least the three people in this room, while I don't believe in ghosts, I do believe in that. Let's put it that way. Believe in this type of mysticism, right? As most would look at this, right? I think a scientist would try to devalue our own premonitions, right? Just to kind of play devil's advocate for a second. But my question is, are there any, for example, are there any situations where one frog does something and reacts to another frog? You know what I mean? Or any type of naturalistic phenomena where that might exist. Are you familiar with any, or are there any people who have researched this?
I feel like it's like I'm out of my element, but I feel like it's a measurement problem because we can measure it at a really small scale, like the crazy quantum stuff we actually can see with light and individual photons. They'll act different when being observed versus not being observed, stuff like that. But maybe it's almost like the order of magnitude to measure it happening with frogs. We don't have the tools. Just like measuring gravity directly was really hard. We knew about it, but I think only recently we measured it directly, like a year ago or 2 years ago or something. I'm not positive about that. Measured in the sense of measuring a gravity wave to prove that it actually is something moving.
And so maybe to push, like, let's say we'll call this the research of Korkut, right?
Korkut Research University.
Hypothesis. The Pektas hypothesis. So one of the issues with that value chain would be then if, let's say that we were actually signed, at least I'll speak for Josh and myself, Korkut, I think you're way beyond, I think you're definitely probably in this category. Let's say that we're all scientists, right? And that we all have validity of what we're thinking, and we just put together some type of formula for a hypothesis, which is that we want to study this reaction between two different objects where you explained it much better than I did, where one action has an impending reaction on another object, right? Without them actually coinciding together. Or an individual object has two separate instances that react to each other that aren't necessarily congruent with the regular timeline that we look at things. Is that kind of a decent butchered version of what you're talking about? Let's say yes for a second. So then yes. The next part would be based on the hypothesis of Josh, which is it's a measurement tool. So in order to find that, maybe it's just the emphasis of how we're measuring. Like now we need to use our measurement tools to be looking for different things than what they're currently looking for. So currently they're looking for that breaking point when two things come together like this, but rather we should be using measurement tools in order to just see if there's the same reaction in the naturalistic philosophy of things in nature where these things might be taking place. And perhaps we're not doing that enough in order to understand if this is actually something that exists in nature. Would that be possibly a summary of what we're talking about?
Nope.
Fair.
Measurement problem is one of the problems that's been discussed widely. But the measuring device itself has its own quantum states too. So it's not the measuring device or the measurement itself, but the observation or the observer, that's the thing here.
Okay, this has been, first of all, this has been amazing. So
it's a little bit complicated. It has to be developed then it has to be transferred.
We need to pull more people into this type of conversation to give more vantage points of expertise, right? But but nonetheless, that's just showing a demonstration from a scientist / engineer of looking at value and the values of our system, and then looking at essentially a scientific process of trying to go and research things in nature that we currently might be neglecting, right? Rather than just focusing on this capitalistic value chain in order to make our decisions. Right? Because obviously what you're saying, it does not necessarily have a discrete financial outcome. So therefore, it's going to be hard to generate funding for something like that, because you can't quantify that when this does this, it actually goes to this, right? That I get to have less labor and I make more products and I make more money.
I've been reading around this stuff like quantum phenomena, but I still have I really need to learn more about it. I think your idea about the new field is pretty fascinating.
If you take certain concepts, there are 5 or 6 major concepts that give the quantum theory its shape, and if you take those things absolutely correct without any hesitation, and if you exercise your mind around those concepts, everything changes its shape in your understanding. I always think about these things in my life. For example, there's this weird thing. If memory is important for any kind of information processing, for example, in a computer, there's this memory thing going on, and or if you think about, you can interpret the physical action of things in classical mechanics. For example, when you throw a ball, for example, the ball also has you can interpret it like that. The ball also has a memory, like it knows where it was before, so it can calculate where it will be next. So it goes into the air. So by applying a force onto the ball, you kind of implement in the ball's memory the trajectory that it has to go. You can interpret it like this. But when it comes to quantum phenomena, when you take these 5 or 6 fundamental concepts of quantum mechanics, and when you exercise your thoughts around this, and when you consider memory, keeping a memory of something, then dreaming and remembering are not 2 different things, or contemplating or remembering are not 2 different things. For example, remembering tomorrow can be a sentence.
Right. Right. It shifts things.
It can be a very meaningful sentence in that sense.
Right. And yeah, I see what you're saying. It exactly, kind of like sustaining disbelief and applying those to anything completely changes our relation with time, and it makes it nonlinear.
And
you can go forward and backwards.
I was discussing this with a professor of architecture, a very intelligent woman. I met her in one of my friend's apartments. She was just there having a coffee for half an hour. And we were sharing ideas. And I brought up this and quantum computation and remembering futures and these kinds of things. And she stopped and her eyes went into the abyss, into the void, and started looking. And she said, then the entire reality of a designer would change. And I said, how? Imagine you're imagining something. Imagine you're imagining a building to change the spirit of the city. But as you imagine to change the spirit, you're changing with the spirit that you're imagining.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And she said, the entire field of architecture would dramatically change from the university to the application. What are we going to teach the kids? And because there's this established structure, the architecture has its own spirit. You are building a small apartment, or you're building a cathedral, you're creating space for people to live inside or interact with. So, but what you're imagining is changing as you're imagining.
Yeah.
To teach this to their pupils is quite challenging.
Right. Or what does it do to the field of psychology or self-help or something, right? You're imagining something changing, and as you're imagining it, it's changing in a feedback loop of both directions. It's too hard to contemplate. It makes sense to me too, because the thing with, I mean, it doesn't make sense, but I can see it having actual scientific basis, because I read a lot about consciousness and like those fields. And I was reading an interesting theory just the other day that's been gaining more traction, where they say that the experience of being conscious, like actual, I'm here and self-aware, might be a phenomena of the electromagnetic field being generated by the brain because of all the impulses and whatnot that are traveling around, or something along those lines. So the actual conscious experience of being alive is this thing existing in the electromagnetic field. And if that's true, then, that all gets messed up and played with by all these quantum phenomena, in both directions, like both from like the physical side and from that existence as this standing wave in the electromagnetic field. Really strange possibility. But if it's true, it opens up all these things as well.
I always had this thinking or understanding about great inventions or artistic things like what Picasso has done or things like that. I think when the number of thinking minds reach a certain threshold, like the population increases or the number of brains in the field increases, they kind of all generate this own thinking, contemplating, dreaming states in them. And it kind of resonates in the electromagnetic field around us. But when the field is being disturbed with these minds all together, at some point it self-organizes itself into some critical frequency. And at these times or moments, there are certain people with better receptivity to the field, so they can just take information from the field, interpret it, and symbolize it. This can be a new artistic movement. This can be a new scientific theory. like Einstein or Newton did, but the awareness of the field becomes evident in the awareness of the person, and if that person says, oh, I found this. Maybe it is not found. Maybe it is collectively found, but these people act like antennas. And they have better symbolic they have better symbolic proficiency, so that they can verbalize or use their talent to reflect it back onto the people around them.
Right. I see what you're saying. It's almost, I mean, it's complex and I don't fully understand it, but it's almost as what we might call inspiration or intuition by those individuals, like, you know, Leonardo da Vinci or Newton or something. And even what they would describe as intuition, because maybe they're not aware of being able to pick these things out, but it was actually kind of imbued by this overall zeitgeist. That's pretty fascinating.